The other day, I learned something that goes against everything I thought I knew about food.
Herbs.
Herbs.
I've always thought that fresh herbs were one of the keys to great cooking, but I was wrong. At least, mostly. So there's two different kinds of herbs, right? You've got your delicate herbs, like these on the left, your coriander, your parsley, your basil. These are the soft sort of herbs that you'd use in salads or garnish or whatever, the sort of herbs that you can eat raw. Then you've got your hard herbs, your rosemary, your thyme, your sage. These are the herbs that you've got to actually cook if you want to use them. Neither of these herbs actually last very long, so someone came up with the idea of drying them to make them last longer. And that works! Dried herbs last about a year instead of, say, a week or two like these fresh herbs will. But here's the thing, not all herbs dry the same way. These delicate herbs on the left, they grow in wet, humid conditions. They're used to being moist. In simple terms, that means that a lot of their flavour is actually locked up inside the water. And when that water is removed, the flavour goes too. So dried, delicate herbs are nothing compared to the fresh versions. But these hard herbs on the other hand, these on the right, they're used to dry conditions. They're used to growing in arid conditions where they don't get much water. Most of their flavour isn't locked up in the water, so when they're dried, they don't lose as much flavour. The dried versions of hard herbs are basically just as flavourful as the fresh counterparts. In practice, this means that dried delicate herbs are pretty much useless, just toss them. But it also means that hard herbs are basically just as good dried as they are fresh. And since dried herbs are cheaper and last longer, you can actually stop using fresh hard herbs entirely, as long as you follow a few basic rules. First, make sure you cook them for at least 20 minutes so that they can rehydrate. 2. Store them in a cool, dry and dark place for up to a year. If you keep them any longer than a year, they're going to lose the flavour and you might as well throw them away. 3. Make sure your conversions are right. If a recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fresh herbs, use 1 teaspoon of dried herbs, or vice versa. So if the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fresh rosemary, use 1 teaspoon of dried rosemary. Or if the recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of dried basil, use 1 tablespoon of fresh basil. And so on and so forth. You get the idea. And that's it. Follow these rules and you'll never have to use fresh, hard herbs again. You'll save loads of money and you'll have less waste too. I mean, it's rare that I actually use a full packet of fresh herbs before they go bad, and I bet it's the same story for you too. And not that anyone asked, but my favourite way to use dried herbs is to infuse my cooking oil with the flavour. To do this, I heat up my oil on medium-high heat, and once it's hot, I'll throw in whatever herbs I'm using, in this case just a bit of rosemary, and then I'll cook it for about a minute to release the flavour. And then from there, I'll just continue the recipe as usual. And that's it. By doing this, you're both rehydrating the herbs, and you're adding the flavour to the oil, which will be spread throughout the dish, creating a nice consistent flavour. Now, all of that's good and well, but before you figure out how to use herbs properly, you need to make sure your food is actually seasoned right. I mean, you could have the finest herbs on the planet, whatever the hell that means, but if you haven't added salt to your food, it's not going to taste good. To learn more about seasoning, click the video on the screen right now.